Examples of adding and subtracting fractions. So I've written the steps down the side here to remind me. First step, I need to have equal denominator, so a common denominator. Second, I need to add and subtract the numerators only. Third, I need to simplify. And just a reminder that for this unit, we're not using calculators, so no calculators for this unit. So let's take a look at example 1. Example 1, I have 3/8 plus 1/4. So I have an 8 and a 4 as my denominators, which are not the same value. But I know 4 goes into 8. I multiply 4 by 2, I end up with 8. So we're going to multiply this second fraction by 2. So now I'm left with 3/8, which stays the same, plus 1 times 2 is 2, 4 times 2 is 8. Perfect. Now I have 3/8 plus 2/8. My denominators are the same. Now I can move on to step 2, which is to add and subtract my numerators. So I have 3 plus 2. Well, 3 plus 2 is 5. My denominator stays the same, so 5/8. My third step is to simplify. Well, 5 and 8 don't have a number in common apart from 1 that they can both be divided by. So this is as low as my fraction gets. That's the simplest form. It's the lowest form. It's as much as I can reduce that fraction. But what if I used my other method? What if I didn't realize that 4 can be multiplied by 2 to create 8? What if I just didn't see that? Well, let's try that. So let's start again. We have 3/8 plus 1/4. And this time I'm going to multiply 4 times 8 to get a common multiple, which will be 32. So I've multiplied my 3/8 by 4, which gives me 3 times 4 is 12. 8 times 4 is 32, plus, and I've multiplied my other fraction by 8. 1 times 8 is 8. 4 times 8 is 32. Again, I have the same numbers on the bottom, 32. So I'm ready for step 2. Step 2, I'm going to add. So I'm going to add my numerators, 12 plus 8. Well, 12 plus 8 is 20. My denominator stays the same, so it stays 32. I have 2 even numbers here, so I'm going to simplify. Because they're both even, I know they can both be divided by 2. So 20 divided by 2 gives me 10. 32 divided by 2 gives me 16. Another set of even numbers. So let's divide by 2 again. 10 divided by 2 is 5. 16 divided by 2 is 8. 5/8. I can't get any simpler than that. That's as low as I can go. That's the lowest form of that fraction. Let's look at example number 2. 5/8 plus 1/3. This time, 3 does not go into 8 and 8 does not go into 3, so I have to find a common multiple. Easiest way, multiply these two by each other. 8 times 3 is 24. So my lowest common multiple is going to be 24. So I'm going to multiply 5/8 times 3 and 1/3 times 8. 5 times 3 is 15. 8 times 3 is 24. 1 times 8 is 8. 3 times 8 is 24. Now, my denominators are the same. They're equivalent. So now I can move on to step number 2. I can add my numerators. So 15 plus 8 gives me 23, and my denominator stays the same, so it is 24. 23 and 24 only have the divisibility by 1 in common, so stays the way it is. That's the lowest form I can write it in, 23 out of 24. Let's try example 3. Example 3, we have 4/5 subtract 2/3. Again, 3 does not go into 5, 5 does not go into 3, so I'm going to multiply these to get the common denominator of 15. So my 4/5 I've multiplied by 3, and my 2/3 I've multiplied by 5. 4 times 3 is 12, 5 times 3 is 15. Subtract because we're subtracting now. 2 times 5 is 10, 3 times 5 is 15. My denominators are the same, 15 and 15. So now I can move on to step 2. I can subtract. So 12 subtract 10 gives me 2. So my numerator is 2, and my denominator has to stay the same. So it's 15. 2 and 15 have no factors in common apart from 1. So that is my final answer. Let's look at our last example, example 4. So I have 7/8 subtract 1/4. Well, I have 2 ways to this one. Just like in example 1 where I had 8 and 4, 8 and 4 again is my denominators. So let's try it off first time. Let's multiply my second fraction, my 1/4, by 2, because 2 times 4 will give me 8. Okay, so my first fraction remains the same, 7/8 subtract. 1 times 2 is 2, 4 times 2 is 8. My denominators are the same, so now I can subtract my numerators. So 7 subtract 2 is 5 over 8 on the bottom, 8. And 5 and 8 have no factors in common apart from 1. So that is the simplest form I can make that fraction. Let's try this one using the other method too. So I have 7/8 subtract 1/4. So we're gonna multiply our two denominators together to get a common multiple of 32. A common multiple means 32 can be divided by 4 and 32 can be divided by 8 and still end up with a whole number. So 7/8 is going to be multiplied by 4, and 1/4 is going to be multiplied by 8. 7 times 4 is 28. 8 times 4 is 32. Subtract. 1 times 8 is 8. 4 times 8 is 32. My denominators are the same, so now I can subtract. 20 subtract 8. Well, 28 subtract 8 leaves me with 20. So I have 20 over 32 because my denominator remains the same. Now, these are both even numbers, so I can simplify. I can move on to step 3 and simplify. So 20 divided by 2 would give me 10, 32 divided by 2 would give me 16. Some of you might recognize that 20 and 32 are also multiples of 4, which means both can be divided by 4. So 20 divided by 4 gives me 5. 32 divided by 4 gives me 8. So I'm left with 5/8. Look, they're the same. I want you to also note my equal signs line up. Equal signs line up. I'm writing in a vertical linear format. I am showing my work and my steps. I'm showing what I'm multiplying each fraction by. I'm writing them in brackets to indicate that the whole fraction is multiplied by 8. make sure that your format of how you lay out your questions is this type of a linear format. Make sure your lines separating the numerator and denominator are horizontal lines. We don't write fractions like this. This is incorrect. We don't use that way. We write them with a horizontal line between them. Click on the next video for examples of word problems.